Hello, my name's Philippa Waller.
My name is Penelope Waller, and we are two of the directors at 4D Human Being.
And welcome to the 4D Human Being podcast. What's it all about, Pen?
It's all about your personal and professional relationships. It's about your communication skills, how you lead, how you work and build teams, how you are looking after yourself and your well-being, and how you are much more at choice. What do we mean by that?
Well, sometimes we can get a little caught in patterns in life and we can all be a little bit on our automatic pilot. So 4D Human Being is all about helping us get back to choice and being a four-dimensional human being. And your fourth dimension, of course,
is intention. So whether it's about your impact, your leadership style, your team dynamics, whether it's about your well-being, whether it's about your communication or your presentation skills, anything that involves human beings interacting with other human beings, 4D Human Being are here to help.
we're going to take a deep dive and look at some tools, insights, theories that are going to help you go from a 3D human doing to a 4D human being so that you can happen to the world rather than the world simply happening to you. So, hello, welcome. This was purely by chance.
That we're looking quite Christmassy.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, we look like a piece of holly.
Or two of Santa's helpers.
I think we're... Are we a little elderly?
Are you? I don't think that's the word. Don't. You'll be counting up how many Christmases we've got left next.
Oh, God.
So dark.
That's depressing.
So, welcome to December.
Oh, my goodness me.
It's kicked in.
Well, by the time this podcast goes out, it'll be...
Jack Frost. He's arrived.
Well, I'm feeling very festive. I've got my Christmas decorations up.
Well, what I'm pleased about is that you've got two trees.
I know.
Because I don't even have one.
So on average,
we've got a tree each.
Yeah.
So done.
Although I'm taking both mine because they're very different. So one is traditional reds and and the other is neutral whites.
Are they aspects of yourself? Are you representing yourself in Christmas trees?
Maybe, I haven't gone that deep, but one is real and I haven't had a real tree for a long time.
Gosh, Pen, the psychotherapist in me is screaming to interpret what you've just said. So there's a real tree.
It's very exciting. Very exciting.
A lot of sweeping.
I knew you were going to say that,
Yeah.
but I did realise the reason I haven't had one for such a long time is because of all the sweeping.
Yeah.
But you do have to water a tree. Who knew?
Well,
I did not know that. So that's why I had to do all the sweeping, because it just died. In fact, the last one I had was dead by Christmas Day.
that is not a good metaphor, is it?
It was quite a miserable Christmas tree.
Although,
Christmas Day.
Laura, super segue me up. Right, nice. I'm having that. Tree dead by Christmas Day. Because what we don't want, we're going to be talking about...
It's a tree dead by Christmas Day.
Dead by Christmas Day. But actually, what we want to talk about today is patterns and habits, and the flip side of that, which is getting back to choice.
Are you saying that I don't water plants?
No, I'm saying you do not, thinking about coming up to the holidays, we do not want to be frazzled with those old patterns by Christmas Day. Caught in the same irritations and frustrations. And Christmas holidays, whatever holidays you're celebrating, time back in with sort of old friends and family, those are times when, oh boy, do those patterns get dialed up.
100%. And I like to think, because of the work we do, I like to think I have started to break some of those unhelpful patterns this Christmas. So by example, I unpacked all the Christmas decorations and I realised that in years gone by, I had quite voluminous and complex Christmas decorations. So, for example, I had dozens and hundreds of hanging things that you could hang off the ceiling that you can imagine constructing them and then hanging off the ceiling. I mean, hours. Yeah. And I just looked at them and I thought, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Madness.
Yeah.
So none of that this year.
That's a really healthy pattern break for me.
You're not doing it.
No, I'm not doing any of it. That's my pattern break. I just don't do any of it. And by the way, listeners, well, I was just about to say not bar humbug. I love Christmas. I love the holidays. What I've done is keep a sort of spindly lit tree with baubles, golden baubles on for the whole year.
Yes.
And all I have to do is switch them on. And it's like instant Christmas. And that, for my level of patience.
Minimal.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we're talking about pattern breaking, and that is a really good
segue.
Well, I was going to say it's a really, really good example of breaking patterns in a really healthy way. That, you know, we can get caught in. I always think of this when, in fact, I was probably even putting up Christmas decorations. It was that sort of thing over the top of a window, like a sort of curtain pelmet. Are they called? Maybe. And you know when you're caught in a
sounds an unlikely scenario.
Yeah, it sounds like, but the fact that I even know
you have a pelmet and you're doing
the fact that I even know that word. A curtain rail, I'm going to say. But you know when you're doing something and you're sort of, you've put the stool or the ladder somewhere, and you're doing the thing.
Yes.
And you're stringing up the lights or whatever they are, and you're twisted and stretching to a point where A&E is now screaming,
yes, you're going to be here soon.
You're going to be here soon. But you think, I'll just keep doing it.
Yes, it'll only take a second.
I'll just keep doing it like this. And I think that's a really good metaphor for patterns.
Yeah.
That actually, it's not that it's a better way of doing it. It's just that it's where you are now.
It's familiar. It's familiar.
Your body is in that twisted position. To change is, of course, the effortful thing.
Yes.
Even though you might plummet down off of this stool any minute.
And it's somewhat admitting to yourself that the choice you've made previously, how to hang those decorations, was perhaps not the best or the nicest one. And sometimes we don't want to accept that.
Pen, I'm literally getting my notebook out because you've already made me think of something else that's such a huge thing in psychotherapy, which is the paradox of change, firstly, is you have to accept where you are before you can change. Yes. It's all very well looking over at the oasis.
The chasm across.
And the vista of glory that is my house at Christmas over there. But you have to accept where you are. But the second thing is, what you've just talked to, is I think one of the most wonderful things when you get there in therapy or in yourself as a human being is when you are able to genuinely thank yourself for everything that you've done up until this point and how you've done it, because that is all that you knew. And thank you.
Yes.
You've got me this far. Yes. And I really want to thank you. And
I'm going to release you.
I'm going to release you from your strategies and tactics. They've just about scraped us through. We've, had a few broken relationships along the way, and not talking to the mother-in-law. But we're clinging on by the fingernails, or we've got to a level in our organisation that we can't quite get any further. We've sort of hit the ceiling. We don't know why. So really, thank you.
I really love that. You did your best.
Yeah, that part of you genuinely did their best. And in fact, it's probably an 8-year-old that's managed to get you to VP level. So you really want to thank them. You want to say thank you so much. And I'm going to pop you on the bench now. And we're going to try a few different things.
Take some time out.
You've done really well. You're exhausted, by the way, the 8-year-old who's just done a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to take it from here, and because we're going to break some patterns.
We're going to try some new things.
We're going to try some new things. And that part of you, because that part of you would rather you fell off the ladder and went to A&E, quite frankly, as long as we keep doing things the same. Yeah. So anyway, we've jumped ahead slightly, but all of the work at 4D is about choice. And we were talking about this the other day, weren't we? That it's all very well talking about being intentional and getting to choice, but we have to understand how much we're in pattern, habit and trance before we can realise that we could have a different choice. Because what we hear people say is, but I don't have a choice.
Yes, exactly. And when I say
and we all say it
sometimes. Yes, and we also think that the way we do things is just the way that one does things. It's like when we look at reality and we think, well, that's just reality and everyone sees it the same. Well, of course they don't, and they do things differently. In fact, I remember, I think we've said this before, but our father, bless him, when he used to come into our houses, he used to open the cupboards and say it's exactly like being in his house with his wife, our mother, because
the way we stacked
everything, just
jam jars.
Don't think that's how you do it, isn't it?
Well, I've talked about jam jars before.
You have talked about jam jars,
and I've still got a cupboard of empty jam jars, because our mother made jam.
Yes,
and I have a cupboard of empty washed jam jars.
Just because it was the habit of collecting jam jars. Charlotte and I and Sarah have broken that habit, our sisters. Yeah, it's time, maybe.
I've broken many, to be fair.
Still got the jam jar. Yeah. You do sometimes make jam.
Well, therapy doesn't cover jam jars, interestingly enough. It's interesting. It covers more of the internal structuring. Yeah, so I have to get to my kitchen.
Anyway, point being that absolutely, before we even work with ourselves or when we're working with leaders and teams to talk about how we can actually break patterns and affect new behavioural change, we have to first of all accept that all of our behaviours, either collectively or individually, are patterns that we have just learnt and embedded.
And this also speaks to team and business cultural change, organisational change. That wouldn't it be lovely if we could wheel in those beautiful, shiny new values in their beautiful new colour palette and just go, everyone do this, and sort of just throw a values duvet over the organisation.
Laminate them, pop them on the wall, and suddenly everyone's doing things differently.
But actually people are doing things in the way that they're doing them. And it's exactly the same from an individual to a team to an organisational level. So we've got to look at, what are we actually doing? What are the patterns that we're caught in? And which ones are working?
Yep.
Great. Yep. Shine a light on those. Yep. And then how do we start changing? We're going to talk about that in a minute. Let's talk first, very briefly, about how patterns get formed.
Yes. So, I mean, we are huge fans of Joe Dispenza. In fact, I remember that trip back from France a few years ago when we listened to him for about 18 hours solid. Yeah. It was quite... it was quite an interesting journey. So in terms of what actually happens in your brain, we spoke about this as well recently in terms of the number of times you have to repeat things for new neural pathways to be formed. If you think about something really, really simple, such as, this is a really silly one, but such as how you fold your towels or fold your
clothes. No, it's not silly.
For example.
It's not silly. It's perfect.
You will have done that from whenever you were taught to do that. You might have been a young child, you might have been a teenager, whatever it might be. And you have done that so many times. There is a neural pathway built in your brain.
A towel folding
pathway that is so solid and strong, because every time you have gone to touch a towel, automatically, without even thinking, your brain goes to that massive superhighway in your brain and goes, oh, I know how to fold a towel. You don't have to even think about it. It's just because this is going to happen automatically. And this is how patterns are formed. So we can operate pretty unconsciously most of the time based on these patterns that have formed. And as you said before, lots of them will really, really serve us. I don't want to spend 5 minutes every time I fold a towel thinking, oh, how should I? How do you fold a towel?
Absolutely. It's like driving a car, isn't it?
Yeah. So really, really useful in many, many ways.
Yes.
And
it can get us stuck.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if we think about it from a 4D perspective, when we think about pattern building, you've inherited, been conditioned, and learned. So we can think about it. This is a little bit of a clean sort of slice of the pie, but it's quite a nice way of doing it. You physically inherited a lot from your ancestors, and you have emotionally often been conditioned as a child into what we call strokes and slaps, what's wanted, what's not wanted, how should I be, what feelings are okay, what feelings are not okay. And intellectually, similarly, you've been somewhat conditioned, but also you've learned through your education and your job. So all of that has happened. All of that has come to you. Yep. You've either inherited it, been conditioned, or learned. And here you are.
Yes.
Twisted up at that curtain rail, or folding towels in a certain way, or having difficult conversations at work, or avoiding them, having a response to them in the same way, or finding the same people irritating and feeling justified in your response to them. Absolutely. Yep. So there we are. That's our patterning, our habits. And of course, what we're interested in at 4D Human Being is getting back to choice. And so one of the first things is to get excited to some extent about the idea, curious. And we do a lot of work on yes and as a beginning, as a tool that underneath which really sits all of that sort of change work and that changing the game. Well, if I think about moments in our lives where we sort of helped each other, in a way you could think, oh, yes and yes, but it's just a small thing. It's the tip of the iceberg that if you can catch that language.
Yep.
So when you and I have had conversations in the past over really tough things in life where it really felt like you were being cornered, if you can catch the yes but, that's when you can start cracking open
what choices you have.
What else might be possible. Exactly. Yeah. If we didn't yes but that, if we didn't push it away, if we went, okay, well, what if or yes and, suddenly you can open up.
Exactly. And that has been an absolute game changer in terms of choices I've made in life. So I know, as you say, we use that as a language tool. Sometimes we laugh about it with clients because, of course, if you say it in a way that's not intentionally...
Yes, and I'm still right.
Exactly. Yes. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is much, much deeper and broader than that. But these can be absolute game changers in terms of breaking patterns and getting back to choice. And before we even apply any of those tools, going back to what you just said, this really is about pulling it back to the self.
Yes.
Because very often when we think about things that aren't working in our lives and, we find things difficult or relationships difficult or whatever, we're not getting the promotion that we want, et cetera, can be very tempting to blame other people, blame organisations. And as we will always say, there is a truth to all of it. There's responsibility in all of the different multiple perspectives. And the only thing you can change is yourself. So until you pull it back to yourself, recognise your own patterns, behaviours and belief systems, you're just going to be caught in the same game.
Yeah, you're in the same game.
Unless somebody else by chance has either done one of our workshops or by chance dramatically changes the game, the only choice you've got is to bring it back to the self.
And that's very risky.
And it can be quite difficult to hold the mirror up sometimes and look at your patterns.
In many ways, Pen. In many ways. Particularly after a festive party, I'm sure. No, you're so right to bring it back to the self.
I don't mind today because I've got a good blow dry today.
She's got this new gadget and she bought it without telling me, which is the ultimate betrayal.
It's called a betrayal, apparently.
It's a betrayal.
But there's a whole...
It's like a hairbrush that also blow dries.
Yes. And I'm sure these things have been around for a long time. But if I think about when we were teenagers, the options we had available to us to deal with our hair was very, very limited. Let's put it like that. Now you can just look coiffed every day of the week.
You can. You can. So bringing it back to the self. Otherwise...
Bring it back to topic.
Yeah, bring it back to topic. Bring it back to your hair. Bringing it back to self and what can you do? So that curiosity around, okay, before I say yes, but what if? What else is possible? Otherwise, you're simply caught in another pattern of the blame game, aren't you?
Yeah.
Game or victim.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other pattern. Yeah. So thinking about Christmas, thinking about the holidays, family, friendships, people who've known you a long time, maybe familiar routines or the schedule that you might have around this time, the kind of gift swapping or the meal preparing, all of those things, there will be patterns going on like crazy around those. Who does what? Whose role is what? You will already be thinking about past holidays and who was like what and what happened that time. And you'll be already predicting what's going to happen this holiday, who's going to annoy you, how you're going to avoid that person, how they'll feel about your present, what they'll say that's going to irritate you.
Well, we've already had multiple conversations with various friends around their families. And
So not only will it be, do we sort of think, that is just how the world is. We are adding to it every year by looking back over the past, kind of entrenching our evidence and then looking forward and already, as Joe Dispenza would talk about, creating the future by already sort of painting the scenery for what's going to be writing 100%. The script for what's coming
100%.
Next. So we have to be right here, right now, take a breath, recognise what you've looked at in the past, recognise what you think is going to happen in the future, and take a moment now to get curious about how you might change patterns that aren't working for you this holiday.
And there will be some that are working really, really brilliantly.
Sure. So I don't cook, for example.
And that works brilliantly
for you.
We'll keep that. So you're not going to change that pattern, are you? You're not buying a kind of £25 turkey and popping that in the oven.
No.
So one thing I heard, which I thought you might be really interested in, was this ritual that this family had. I think it was on Instagram or something. Yeah. And on Christmas Eve, they buy each other a book.
Uh-huh.
And they have a reading evening together in front of the fire with hot chocolate. And they start reading their books. Isn't that nice?
Well, exactly. And this, this is moving into not simply breaking patterns, but putting new ones in, which is lovely.
Yeah.
So why is this important? Well, because you are going to go round and round the pattern wheel. You're going to feel, this is when we get stuck and this is where we get frustrated. And this is also where we get limited in our career or even hobbies or pastimes. So there's a stuckness that can start to lead to either low self-esteem or frustration or disappointment. And that could slide down the hill. So breaking patterns can also break open new pathways and change the game. A quick word word from us at 4D Human Being. If you're enjoying the show, please do click follow so that you can have the 4D Human Being podcast instantly in your feed. And we'd love it if you liked and reviewed us. Let us know what you think.
Please do think of one or two people that you could share the 4D Human Being podcast with. Somebody who would really benefit from the content you're listening to right now.
Back to the show. One of the most important things to think about from a 4D perspective, whether we're thinking about home and holidays or whether we're thinking about work, is in a way this sounds so simple
and obvious.
But of course, this is so often where it gets stuck. Is firstly, you have to change the input if you want to change the output. Like the idea that
you can turn up exactly the
same. And having not really thought about it, and hoping that something might change. So you've got to change the input to change the output. And that might be around your choices of behaviour or exactly that, how you show up. When the door opens, when you're faced with the mother or brother-in-law that you don't like, whatever, how are you going to change? But the other thing from a 4D perspective that's really important is it has to be in, we would say 4 dimensions, but it certainly can't be in 1 dimension. No. And what I think happens so often in organisational change or teams or individuals or indeed people's personal lives is we think if we read a book or we get given the company vision or strategy, we get the words, we get the information that we should then be able to make those changes.
It's done. We told you.
Yeah, we told you.
We told you the new values of the company.
Or you've had a conversation with your partner or husband or wife or friend, and they've said, "You've got to change how you talk to my mother. I think if you just change how you show, I think if you just felt differently about it, see her in a different way." That'll be all right. You could change it. Change. I think just do something different this year. And you go, right, I hear that information.
Yeah.
And
I might even agree with it.
Yeah. But how do I
actually do that?
How do I do that? And of course, the other 3 dimensions in the 4-dimensional model are physical, emotional, and intentional. That we change through setting an intention, changing our emotional state, and changing the behaviour. Of course, we need the intellect, we need the knowing.
It's the first step.
But that doesn't, in fact, that could even leave us much, much more frustrated because now the gap's opened up between our stuck pattern and what we know. Yeah. So really frustrated.
Yeah.
So we need a 4D change.
Totally. And you can think about this in terms of developmentally as human beings. We can advance ourselves developmentally in the intellectual dimension as much as we want. We can do degrees and courses and read books and, we can really understand things at a conceptual level intellectually. And that's brilliant. I'm all for that. We love that.
Love it.
And it is only one part of your development as a human being. And similarly with what we're talking about, it is only one part of what actually leads to behaviour.
Exactly. So let's stick with the example of the
folding towels.
I was going to say of the irritating, let's say an irritating family member or in-law. That that you want to change this. Like it's no fun. You leave these holiday events frustrated and irritated and rolling your eyes and saying you're never going to do it again. What if you change your intention towards them, number 1? So actually I'm going to go in and I'm going to be warm or I'm going to be curious towards them. So just one word, just an intention towards them that might be different from already irritated or guarded or defended. So first of all, change the intention. Secondly, change the emotional state. So what if you, rather than thinking they irritate me, what if you went in with a kind of like, I'm quite amused because I think I know what she's going to say to this, and there can be some humour around it, for example, maybe, as long as it's not terribly offensive. Yeah. But humour might be a good one, that actually you can play a little bit more.
Put some fun into the mix.
That actually, I'm going to guess when I say this that she's going to probably say that back. And then the other one is behaviourally. So what if you opened your arms a little bit more, you dialed up your smile a little bit more, or your expressiveness a little bit more? Like really simple things.
Gave them a hug,
exactly, if that's appropriate. So behaviourally, what if you change one thing behaviourally that has already maybe put them on the back foot and thought, oh, I don't think we're playing the same game as last year.
This doesn't feel familiar.
We're not playing battle ping pong. Exactly. So when you start to think in those dimensions, one tiny thing in each of those dimensions, suddenly you have got a lot of I was going to say weaponry, but it's totally the wrong word. But you've got a lot that's bolstering you towards, and that will hold you, even if some of those irritating bullets get fired back.
Yep.
You've got so much going on here. You keep the body language up, you keep that smile up, the gestures open, whatever it is, and you keep being playful. Interesting.
Yeah. And very often we talk about the fact that the entry point into breaking a pattern doesn't always have to be the intellectual. So it doesn't have to be that you have to really self-analyze and then really think about things and understand things differently. You can access change through any of the dimensions. So even changing your state physically and how you're sitting and how you're behaving, that will then change your emotional state because of the hormones that are being released. It will change then how you think. So there's lots of different ways to access these changes. You don't have to necessarily sit down and contemplate it for hours on end.
Well, exactly. And actually, it's just making me think, like, to really be playful with this, because it can be a lot of fun. I mean, as long as it's not totally disingenuous. But, you know, for example, if that family member turns up with, I don't know, a sort of bright patterned outfit, you could, rather than thinking, oh, you know, I hope I can delay as long as possible having to talk to them, you could open with, wow, that really brings out the colour of your eyes. It looks amazing on you. I mean, already you've changed their emotional state, which has already changed the game massively, because the chances of them now kicking into their pattern of complaining or moaning or being annoying is far reduced, because you've already set up a different game. So you just play with it. It's absolutely fascinating.
Think of it as a game.
Think of it like a game, exactly. So couple of tips I want to give on pattern changing. One is, a really nice game, is to do the opposite. So play the paradox game. Invert. That if you know that you tend to turn away or avoid, what would it be like to move towards and engage? If you know that you tend to be quite quiet, what would it be like to dial your energy up and offer some conversation up? If you talk a lot, what would it be like to dial it down and ask some questions and listen?
I had this with a delegate the other day, and it was a while ago. I ran the program, and he was very present, but he wasn't one of the most vocal people in the room. And I saw him the other day, and I was talking to him, and he said, I can be seen as quite telly, like I know a lot of stuff, I've got a lot of experience, I can really solve things very quickly, and I have a bit of a reputation for being, quite front foot in terms of sharing my opinion, and sometimes even quite abrasive. And I said, well, that is like the opposite of my experience. He said, I absolutely went in with the intention of listening to other people over those couple of days, and it was an absolute I had such a different impression of him, and I'm sure his colleagues did as well. So that did take some thought. The word he put in his head was listening, and it totally changed it. So
lovely.
So we can really apply this in the workplace. And it doesn't mean you've got to change on a permanent basis all the time. Choose a meeting.
And play. Exactly. And that intentionality is raising our awareness on it and making a choice. And at this point, it feels really important to say, if you are catching yourself saying, but that's just not me.
But it's them that's the problem.
But it's them that's the problem. that those are really good, like, red flags. No, that's not me. I would never do that. Actually, what really is going on here is those are unpracticed versions of me. They are unpracticed ways of being. We can all listen. Like, I imagine, for example, if you tend to be more of a talker, if somebody came to you terribly distraught about something terrible that happened and said, I really need to talk to you about this, I'm imagining at that point you would listen.
You'd pull something out the bag.
You'd pull something out the bag and you'd be able to listen. So we all have this at our disposal. It's patterns. And patterns are the things that we've practiced
Exactly.
more.
Well, it comes back to, the whole discussion around personality, which really fascinates me in terms of who we think we are. And we can be anything and can become anything, and could have been quite different in the past. And we like to think we have an identity that we hold on to. This is who I am, this is how I operate, this is how I behave, this is what I believe, etc., etc. And yes, there is a truth to that, and that has been built up.
It's been built up
through
absolutely
what we've inherited, how we've been conditioned, what we've learned, and what we now believe, and what is very familiar to us. And we can change.
We can change it. Lisa Feldman Barrett. If you haven't checked her out, check her out. Absolutely fascinating research on the brain and how our emotions work. And she would call us, we are our own architects. Emotions, if you like, are not objective.
Yeah.
We are all constructing and experiencing them based on our own sort of evidence gathering from the past into the present of what we think is going on. Right. So we are like the architects of our emotional kind of world and experience and reality.
So if anybody ever says, well, that's just how I felt.
Yeah. You've built that.
That you've absolutely, that is a choice. It may not feel like it's a choice.
Because it's come from young.
But that is a choice. And we talk about this very often. If we talk about...
I'm somebody who gets irritated when.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We talk about this in terms of if you had a kind of a tightening in your stomach when you go on stage to present, some people will interpret that as excitement and some people will interpret that as fear. And you will probably say to yourself, well, that's just who I am. I'm somebody who.
Yeah.
It's learned. Yeah. It's a pattern that you've learned.
Exactly. So you're much better off going, oh, there's a pattern of tightening in my stomach. That's really all that's going on. You could call it excitement or you could call it, irritation or anxiety. Actually, it's an energy pattern that's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you catch yourself saying, that's not me, that is your old pattern desperately trying to cling on to old ways of being because the unknown is so terrifying. To that part, of course, what we would offer you is the unknown is the most exciting place because that is the place of potential and creation and everything that could open out in your future. So a couple of tips. So listen, be curious. There's some nice pattern changing tips if it's the opposite to what you do. I think these are 3 nice tips on pattern when we think about conversations, or maybe if we think about patterns when we get irritated with people and the way that we might talk then or get into dialogue. Here's a really nice 3 ways in, if you like, 3 perspectives to think about that might help us to break patterns. So if you can recognize a time where maybe you felt defensive or irritated or somebody
never
happened, or someone irritated you and you felt really justified in your response to them, in your sort of snapping at them or whatever it was.
Yep.
Ask yourself these questions. If you were filmed in this conversation, would you be happy for that to be published? And that would tell you whether you're at choice, really intentional, this is how I want to show up, or whether you've been hooked and caught into pattern. So firstly, would you be happy for this to be published to your employers or to, social media? Secondly, if you put yourself in the other person's shoes, so this could be a family member, a friend or a colleague or somebody that you are giving some feedback to at work or whatever it might be, if you put yourself in their shoes, would you be happy with the way that you are being spoken to, in this case, by you?
Yeah.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
And thirdly, if you imagine that the other person is a really close family member or friend that you really love, that's an important thing, someone you really care for, would you talk to them in the way that you're talking to this person? I think those are 3 really good checks around, am I fully in 4 dimensions here? Am I really connected to my intention and showing up in a way that I feel proud of, that I wouldn't be ashamed of if people could see it? Am I emotionally in a place where I am in human connection in a way that actually speaks to my integrity?
Yeah.
Am I intellectually using language that I would be absolutely happy for anybody else to hear? And am I physically, is my body language operating in a way that if that was filmed, I'd go, yeah, that's absolutely...
I absolutely love that.
It's nice, isn't it?
That 3-step check. Yeah. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. To check whether or not you are...
At choice.
And whether or not you would be absolutely happy. The way that you are showing up is how you would want to be represented in the world because you are the author of you.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's breaking patterns. We wish everyone happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Have a lovely time. It's very cold now, isn't it?
Yes, it's cold, it's chilly. So enjoy and use it as a time to play, to enjoy maybe shifting those patterns a bit in a really positive way.
It's the perfect time to break some patterns. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 4D Human Being podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Do take on board some of the insights, tools and tips, because every time that you try something new to get back to choice, you are making a vote for the you that you want to become. And I love that phrase, Pen.
I do too. And please do share this episode with somebody that you know would really benefit from the lessons and learnings we've been chatting about today.
And of course, if you're interested in more from 4D Human Being, do get in touch. We run workshops, trainings, online, in person, conference events and keynotes. We've got the 4D On-Demand platform for your whole organisation. And we do have a free Essentials membership where anybody can sign up for absolutely free to access some of our insights, tools and tips. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to hear more. We cannot wait to hear from you and to carry on the conversation.